Here's a quick tutorial on the CLA-2A compressor. In Waves it's called the CLA-2A. It's an artist signature compressor. Let's walk through the controls real quick and then we'll look at a test case. This left switch is compressor limit. This is the ratio switch. You either have 4:1 or I believe it's 10:1 on limit. We normally use it in the compress mode or 4:1. When you go to the limit, it sounds great still, but it reacts differently. So on some vocals, it does work, but I would recommend staying on the compress because it's pretty good on everything on the compress. This next knob is gain. So this is output gain of the compressor. 0 is off, so nothing's passing through. 100 is crazy amounts of boost. 34 or 35 is unity gain if you don't have any compression. So remember that when you're setting this compressor. If you boost it too much, you're going to change your gain structure going through this Waves channel strip. So you really want to leave it around 34 or 35 and use your fader or groups to change your overall gain structure. If you do turn it up too high, you do risk affecting the rest of the gain going through these plugins. Then we have this analog feature. This introduces noise, like low-level power noise into the signal, so we keep it off. And this little dial here is a screwdriver slot in the actual analog compressor, the rack unit. This determines what the compressor is listening and reacting to. 50% or 50 with it vertical means it is pretty evenly mix of listening to high frequencies and reacting to just high frequencies or the full sonic spectrum. The reason the default is 50 is bass frequencies tend to make the compressor react more. So if it is towards high frequency, those bass frequencies or the low end is not affecting the overall compression as much as, or the amount of compression as much as the higher frequencies, mid-range, etc. That really we're looking for the compression on. We're not looking to have like a pumping compressor, which would be more of the flat on sources with a lot of low end. And we're not looking to just affect the high frequencies, although sometimes this is useful on acoustic. So really 50 is a good starting place, or 50% between the two extremes. Then this peak reduction knob is like a threshold. And there's not like a clean way to do this because it is dependent on what's coming in through this high frequency flat ratio. So if you have a vocalist with a lot more low end, it's going to react sooner and you might have your threshold around like 50%. That's really what these knobs are. And if you have like a female vocalist with not a whole lot of low end, or if you've cut a whole lot of low end out in the EQ before it comes into Waves, you might have to turn it up a little bit more in order to start getting compression. This last knob is it changes the display so you can see what's coming in to the compressor and check your gain staging, gain reduction or the amount of compression, and then output, which is the output level going out of the compressor. I'll briefly go over that in a second. So let's look at what it does. I'm going to play a clip of one of our worship leaders, Jelani, singing Promises by Maverick City Music here. And I'm going to play the whole song first, or not the whole song, but I'm going to play the full band. And then I'm going to bring up his vocal a little bit more isolated. And we're going to take a look at this compressor. So we can see what it's doing right now. I do have two compressors in. I will bypass them. And I'll switch between them a little bit so you can see what each one's doing. But let's take a listen.
God from age to age, though the earth may pass away, your word remains the same. Yeah, your history can prove there's nothing you can't do. You're faithful and true, though the storms may.
Okay, so the two compressors react a little bit differently, but they're both really helpful. So the CLA-2A because it has a slower response, it's what's called an optical compressor. It's going to respond a little bit slower to some of the like sibilance or like punch in his vocal as he like punches certain notes. The LA-2A is going to respond slower but with more character, so it almost gives it more like weight in the mix. The 1176 is a lot faster, so it's really good at clamping down on those really fast transient responses, or like when a note hits really fast. But it tends to sound really tight. So combining the two of these and kind of using the best of both of them is really helpful. Now let's isolate his vocal a little bit more. I'm just going to pull down the rest of the instruments real quick, and we'll look at the features of the LA-2A. I'm going to bypass the 1176, so we're only getting the LA-2A, and then I'm going to walk through some other things here like gain staging. So let's start with both compressors out of the loops. This is no compression on the vocal.
God from age to age, though the earth may pass away, your word remains the same. Yeah, your history can prove there's nothing.
So it's not bad, but there definitely is some level inconsistency, and in a mixed situation, whether live or broadcast, that's gonna pop in and out of the rest of the band if you do have the vocals at the right level, just on top of the band. So it would dip down and then it would go up. So we need compressors to level this out a little bit. So let me show you that. I'm gonna bring this in while we're listening, and then I'm going to adjust the peak reduction here so you can kind of hear what it's doing.
God from age to age, though the earth may pass away, your word remains the same. Yeah,
bypass.
Your history can prove there's nothing you can't do.
Back in.
You're faithful and true, though the storms may come.
So it's really subtle, even when we're giving it a lot of compression. You don't want to really go above 7 to 10 dB of compression normally. That's a pretty dangerous range to be in, because then you're also compressing the highs, or like the high dynamic parts, high intensity parts. But because of that, you'll turn up the volume and you'll tend to get more bleed. You'll tend to get a lot more sibilance, a lot more sensitivity, which can be good and bad. It's really a matter of taste. But you do want to probably, on parts like this in the song, you do want to probably only use like 2 to 3 or 2 to 5 dB max. So let's go ahead and listen one more time.
God from age to age, though the earth may pass away,
so I would have it right here.
The same. Yeah, your history can prove there's nothing you can't do. You're faithful and true, though the storms may come and the winds may blow. I'll remain.
And then I'm gonna mess with the gain here, so I'm gonna turn it off. See how it goes down as I go towards 0. Off.
To pass, we sing great.
We went into clipping. This is really dangerous if you do this. If it's clipping, it's actually killing the gain structure down the line. So before this, it's probably between -20, -15, sometimes a little bit lower, rarely a little bit higher. You don't want to go above that much, because then you're potentially getting into distortion. So really the sweet spot, and I'll show you this, how to check for it during rehearsals. The sweet spot is right around 35, so you aren't boosting or cutting too much, but you do have to bring it up if you do use a little bit more compression. So I'll show you the difference between in and out.
God from age to age, though the earth may pass away,
and out. Very similar. I gave it just a 1 or 2 dB boost
your history can
when it's in.
There's nothing you
that
can't
helps
do.
give it a little bit more clarity and punch
and true,
and
though the storms may come.
You can also check your input level coming in. So this is healthy between around -18 or so. That's pretty healthy. And then the output gain, you want to make sure that's roughly similar.
We sing great is
Now
your
if we go up,
faithfulness to me.
see how it went
Great
above
is
-18 to like -3? That means we're 3 decibels below clipping. Now they have headroom built into this, so it won't clip. However, doing that right there, turning it up, is going to affect what's coming into this compressor. And see how this red light turned on? That means the input of this compressor is clipping. So what we want to do throughout the signal chain is actually keep things around -20 to -15 and make sure we're not boosting or cutting a ton. And then I would recommend staying on the gain reduction VU display here. That's the most helpful thing. So quick highlights again. I would recommend using the compress ratio here. Gain around 34, 35. I tend to do 35 and not go above that, because once you're going above that, you're actually raising the overall gain structure going through the plugin. Then peak reduction, this is the one that you would adjust to taste based on how much compression. Lower is less compression, or it's like raising the threshold so it's not reacting as much. Turning it up is lowering the threshold or more peak reduction, and it would start. You would start seeing this gain reduction meter activate. Shoot for between on quiet parts, just barely tickling this needle. On moderate to loud parts, you don't want to go above -7 to -10. Obviously, like if Jelani just is like cranking out notes, it might hit -10, and I wouldn't necessarily adjust it unless you hear it sounding weird. So just overall, shoot for between like -2, -5, a few decibels of compression on this.